So, hello, I'm Ben. I'm the family IT guy. I'm a dad, and I'm a technology and cybersecurity executive with over 30 years of experience. And because of my family and my technical background, I think a lot about this topic of kids being on the internet, because if it's difficult for me as a dad and as a technology expert, then I figure it must be difficult for everybody. And a personal example in my journey so far with my son, who's 9, is when he was 6, he got an iPad and it had YouTube on it. And that was a very quick experiment that did not last very long because YouTube, of course, has awful things on it and he found them. And so we switched him to YouTube Kids because it has the word kids in it. So it sounds like that should be made for kids. It implies as much. It's not. It's technically made for kids, but it has sexual content. It has nightmare content. It has like superheroes having sex with each other. It has Huggy Wuggy, which is this scary monster with big sharp teeth that gave our kid nightmares for months. I think many months. I can't remember how many months, but he still talks about it sometimes, years later. Another character called Sonic EXE, which is like Sonic the Hedgehog, but the nightmare version. And so some like really creepy people make this stuff to mess with kids. And it stays on YouTube Kids, and the way it's labeled and the way it's organized is makes it hard to remove. So that experiment failed. So we got rid of YouTube Kids. So then he was left with his iPad with some kids games and some kids like educational apps. But it was very clear very quickly that it was very addictive. So his behavior around, it was affecting his sleep. It was affecting when he woke up, after he woke up, how he went through his day. And he was just drawn to this device because, of course, that's what these devices are meant to do, is to draw you in and be addictive. And it worked. And so we had to take away his iPad, which he still complains about years later, which, I don't blame him because iPads are cool, but, it's sort of part of the problem. So now he doesn't have any tech that has a screen that is a toy. He has one piece of tech that has a screen, and it's a tool. It's an Apple Watch. It's a heavily restricted Apple Watch that controls who he can call and who he can receive calls from, who he can exchange text messages with. And so my wife and I control that list of approved people, and it's just our family. So he can't have random contact with strangers. He can get directions if he gets lost, and we can see his location, and we share our location with him too, so we can all see each other's location. And so because of this experience that I've had, my mission is to teach parents and children how to navigate the internet safely. And my agenda for this presentation today is I'm going to share facts, I'm going to share data, I'm going to share information about kids on the internet, and so we can all understand what we're up against. My goal is to help you get a grip on online safety by giving you the knowledge and the tools that you need to create boundaries for kids. And you'll leave this presentation today with practical takeaways, things you can actually do to keep your family safe on the internet. So I put together some statistics. These stood out to me as useful and good context for this conversation. And so let's go through them a little bit. So the average age of a kid's first personal technology device, so a device that they primarily use, they're not borrowing their parents' phone anymore, like a tablet, for example, age 6, which coincidentally was the same age when our son got his tablet. Kids are actually usually proficient with devices by age 3, oftentimes even sooner. My niece, I think, was proficient at age 1 or 2 with opening an iPhone, opening apps, knowing how to take pictures, knowing how to navigate the device. Of the 8 billion people in the world, the majority of them, almost 6 billion, are on the internet, and about 5 billion of them are on social media. In fact, many people's first exposure to the internet is via social media because companies like Facebook actually fund internet access for people so that they can get on Facebook, especially in developing countries. Average age of the first view of porn is now 7.5. Supposedly it was 11 before COVID, and all the super exposure to screens during that time has just made the age lower and lower. Almost every middle school student has a phone. Most are smartphones. I don't know the exact percentage, but most kids have smartphones in middle school. Almost every kid uses social media every day. Half of kids use social media almost constantly. The number is supposedly, on average, 11 hours a day, which includes schooling, because schooling is done a lot now on laptops and Chromebooks, and even in middle schools, of course, and even elementary schools, there's laptops and Chromebooks. And so they're just staring at screens all the time. And so kids are basically, like, what I take from this is that kids are being addicted to technology at younger and younger ages, and it keeps getting younger. The exposure to inappropriate content should be expected as a result. It's the nature of the deal. We are wired to seek social rewards, and the psychologists at tech companies have helped their engineers take advantage of our human nature so that they can maximize the amount of time we spend looking at their products. And this informs how we interact with other people, and it's already made a very damaging culture change. So this is a dark topic, but I think it's extremely important, so I have it up here today. This data, I see a lot of people talk about depression and anxiety and even suicide with kids. I see statistics passed around on the internet of this sort of many children have died from suicide. This sort of percentage of kids have died or been clinically treated for depression. But I hadn't really seen a lot of comparative data over time. Because for me, I'm always curious when I look at statistics, how does a statistic today compare to a statistic from last year and the year before and the year before? So I went to the World Health Organization's website because they maintain a global mortality database where they analyze the information that's on death certificates, and they look at cause of death, they look at age, they look at geography, and whatever other notes are on there. And they make this database accessible to the public. And so I went and pulled some data. And I looked at generally just young people, so from age 5 all the way up to age 39, and broken down into groups of approximately 5 years each. There's 3 groups that stand out. And those are the groups whose lines go up and to the right in recent years. And so if we just pick those groups out and just look at them, you can see that, so we started in 1951. Children aged 10 to 14, young teens, the percentage of deaths that occurred that were self-inflicted was about 1%. So of all the children of that age that died in the year 1951, about 1% of them were self-inflicted. And a few percent through the other teenage years and into the early 20s. Then we sort of start going, we see some increases over time, and then this stuff happens. The internet, it becomes generally available to the public in 1997. MySpace comes online, Facebook comes online, the iPhone comes in, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok. I think TikTok was released in 2016. And so these roughly line up with the years of release. And it just so happens to share a space on the graph with this extremely sharp increase. And when I look at this chart, I think there could be a few titles for this actually, other than the official title. One of them is The Effects of Data-Driven Marketing on Children and Young Adults. So marketing that understands its audience and that has a big reach. These are marketing systems. So this chart to me is the effects of marketing on young adults. Or my wife gave me a really good quote, comparison is the thief of joy. So as we see others online, where everybody except us is perfect, and we compare ourselves to perfect, that steals joy and causes depression and anxiety. Or, similarly, another title could be, everybody I see on a screen is perfect all the time. Why aren't I perfect all the time? So let's actually zoom into 1990. So now we see that the younger groups, the percentages have increased as we saw in the previous chart, but we zoom in a little bit just to see how the technology comes in and spaces. What really stands out to me is the blue line of young teens going from about 5% to about 17%. And the red line of older teens, 15 to 19, going for a time above 20%. 1 out of 5 children that die do so in a self-inflicted manner. And I can't help but notice the timing and the correlation with the exposure to a global audience of seemingly perfect people. So this is why alarm bells go off in my head when I look at the statistic of 46% of kids viewing social media almost constantly. A child's frontal lobe develops usually as they get into their mid-20s. So from what I understand, the brain develops from the back to the front, and the front develops last. And that's why teens take risks more so than adults. That's why teens are more likely to experience anxiety and depression when they're under stress. And why the fear of missing out, FOMO, is not just a term, but it's actually a real thing, especially for young people, because it causes increased activity in their portions of their brain where they also experience pain. And so social exclusion, not being on social media and not being where all your friends are and where all the perfect people are, in and of itself can cause emotional distress. And so young people are very vulnerable to reward chemicals like dopamine, which is what these systems effectively provide. Nearly 80% of children under the age of 15 are exposed to cyberbullying, sex trafficking, and porn. Almost 80% of children under the age of 15. 50% of sextortion victims are physically harmed or contemplate suicide. Have you heard the term sextortion? I'll just kind of give a quick definition just in case anybody's not familiar. So it's a play on the word extortion, but basically adults will pose online as children, like predators specifically, of course. Predator adults will pose online as children and create fake profiles where they pretend to be, let's say, a 12-year-old girl. They become friends with a young boy. They chat. Eventually, they think they're dating each other, or at least the actual young boy thinks they're dating this adult that they don't know is an adult. Eventually, pictures get exchanged, oftentimes, and they're kind of sought out, like, hey, why don't you send me some kind of picture that's extremely inappropriate? That happens. The moment the predator receives this picture, they then say, hey, by the way, I'm actually 40. I have all of your friends on social media connected to another social media profile I've created that looks a lot like yours. I have all of your family members connected to it. I'm going to share this picture with them and embarrass you permanently and ruin your life unless you do what I say. And they extort them for more pictures. They extort them to actually meet up in person and take advantage of them. And this is what that chart was all about. So, more broadly speaking, when I think about, okay, it's my responsibility to keep my kids safe. So what do I need to keep my kids safe from? What are the most common causes? What are the most common risks? And what they are, according to the CDC, because the CDC also maintains a mortality database. And so they say the top 3 causes of death for kids aged 10 to 24 are accidents, primarily automotive accidents. Suicide is number 2, and homicide is number 3. The suicide and the homicide statistics are much greater for boys than they are for girls, but those top 3 are the same for boys and girls. And so if I do a simple analysis as a parent, okay, what do I need to focus on if I desire for my kid to be safe? I want to look at the top causes. So the first one is, okay, I need to have a safe car. I need to make sure I'm a safe driver. I need to make sure that if they need a booster seat or a special child seat, that they have that to whatever I can afford to provide for them. Now that I know this data, I need to really make sure that they are not exposed to addictive substances like these things, because the second leading cause of death is suicide. And after that, given that it's homicide, maybe I should make sure that they're not exposed to firearms without adult supervision, something like that. Right? So if I do a risk assessment of how do I keep my kids safe, now I know what the top 3 causes are. I know where to focus my energy. So today we're going to talk about the addictive substances part to address the suicide risk. So because of a child's limited capacity for self-regulation and their susceptibility to peer pressure, they're at a very high risk as they navigate social media and as they navigate online chat rooms. The biggest increase in suicides appears to be caused by social media algorithms and by online chat rooms. So this brings new meaning to how dangerous it can be to follow social norms, to follow what everybody else is doing or what is currently popular, to be afraid to be different. You remember the quote, or, if your parents have ever said, like, if everybody else jumped off a cliff, would you jump too? That's the cliff. So older people, like people 30s and on, as you saw, their suicide rates have increased as well. And actually, I looked at people all the way through their 80s. In fact, as people get older, the suicide rates decrease. And so it's actually, it was very surprising to me. I didn't really know what to expect, but I did not expect this. And so now younger people rates have surpassed older people. There's a book called The Anxious Generation that's very popular on this topic, written by a guy called Jonathan Haidt. And he said, we have overprotected our kids in the real world, and we have underprotected them online. So let's talk about how this happens specifically. So the internet is forever. Nothing gets deleted. Even stuff that says it gets deleted does not get deleted. Your personal and behavioral data is very valuable, which is why it doesn't get deleted. You're followed everywhere you go on the internet, primarily by advertising tracking scripts. This is code that's put into websites, almost every website you visit. And there's lots of reasons behind that I won't get into today, but almost every website you visit has tracking code from Google, Facebook /Instagram, because it's the same company, and nowadays TikTok. You're followed also everywhere you go in person, via devices like TVs, cameras, smart home devices, street cameras, retail store cameras, kids' toys that are connected to the internet, robot vacuums, and even your car. GM is being sued right now for selling people's driving data to insurance companies without their consent. And people's insurance rates have gone up, and then they found out why. Because they drive a car made by GM. And it's not just GM, they all do it. Now, they don't all sell it to insurance companies, but many do. Data, and that's why I started this by saying your personal and behavioral data is very valuable. The insurance companies really like that data. I imagine it saves them a lot of money. Or makes them a lot of money. The information collected by cameras in public used to be stored in the building where the cameras were. So like in the building we're in right now, the cameras, there'd be a device somewhere in this building with either tapes, in sort of the old days, or more modern systems would have a computer somewhere in the building where the camera's plugged in and then the computer had all the footage. Well, now all the modern camera systems store their footage remotely on somebody else's servers. Whatever company it is that sold the camera system, the footage gets stored on their servers. And so that data belongs to them. And so facial recognition and location data should be assumed by every camera that sees you and your family. Everywhere you go, you should assume that it knows who you are, and therefore it knows where you are because the camera system knows where it's placed. It's very important to remember that for internet-connected products, you are not the customer. You are the product. Your data is sold to the customer. The customer is the advertiser. So let's talk about the incentive structures of some of the major tech companies: Facebook, Google, TikTok, Microsoft, OpenAI, many others. Most of these companies are primarily advertising companies who pose as tech companies. The tech facilitates their advertising business. Their goal is to understand you and to understand your behaviors. If something is free, it means you are the product. So if you ask yourself, why is Instagram free? Why is TikTok free? Why is Facebook free? Why is Gmail free? Why is Google free? Like Google search. Why is ChatGPT free? Because you are the product. And something I think is worth pointing out that a lot of people may not know is that Google, for example, just to pick on them for a minute, because they're the biggest player, their product portfolio is very broad so that they can follow you and learn about you everywhere. So for example, in case you don't know, Google owns products like Chrome, Android, Gmail, YouTube, Android Auto, Nest thermostats, Nest doorbells, Nest cameras. So you're literally placing Google's eyeballs in your house if you have a Nest camera. Fitbit watches, Google Wi-Fi, Google Fiber, so that they can actually be your internet connection and analyze all of it. Google Maps, Google Earth, Google Classroom, Google Workspace, Google Drive. So they're in the school, they're in the work, they're in the home, they're in your pocket, they're in your car, they're in space watching you from satellites. Advertising companies make most of their money from selling highly targeted ads to generate sales for their customers. And I'll pick on Amazon for a little bit. They're developing new Alexa products, the little, gizmos that you can talk to and play music from, and they're all cute and fun. They're building radar into these things so that they can watch you sleep and that they can watch you move around your house, and they can determine which products you're using and what your behavior patterns are in your home so that they can better recommend which products you should buy. So just consider that if a video or a photo of you or your kids is on a company's or a government's computers, it does not belong to you. And if your habits and your purchase histories and your web browsing histories and your behavior patterns are on somebody else's computers, they do not belong to you. And so be very cautious about who you're giving your data to. When you use the internet without an ad blocker, and when you use social media, you are volunteering to give your data, your behavioral data, to many third parties who have no interest in your well-being or the well-being of your kids. So there are two core issues at hand that are most dangerous for kids. These are the two things that I'm going to repeat a few times today because these are the two things that are worth all of our focus as parents. Addictive algorithms and online chat rooms. Those two things cause that graph that we saw earlier. Those two things are the most dangerous things that a kid can be exposed to on the internet. So the internet as a whole is not inherently dangerous as a concept. It is addictive algorithms, and online chat rooms. So let's talk about algorithms first. So as we just discussed, the modern internet is controlled by companies and it's controlled by governments. It's intentionally designed to be addictive. Google did $307 billion in revenue in 2023. 76% of that revenue came from selling ads. So that money is based on them following you around the internet. And as we discussed, cars and cameras and all the other things. Meta, which is the parent company that owns Facebook and Instagram and a few other things, they did $39 billion a year in that same year in revenue from ad sales, from following you around and understanding how you behave. Attention as a currency. This is something that I think about a lot. I think that as humans, we have a few inherent currencies, if you could say. Time is the primary one. We get to choose how we spend our time, what takes our time and where we give our time. And I look at attention in the same way. It really, at the end of the day, is up to us as to where we give our attention. And we need to be very conscious of who is taking our attention. So all these companies we've discussed, they need your attention in order to succeed and in order to reach their goals. Tech companies have hired neuroscientists and behaviorists to work alongside their software engineers to develop products that keep people addicted. Devices and apps are created to be addictive, and they create a dopamine release that's very similar and almost equivalent to chemical addictions like those from opioids and alcohol. Every time your device dings, rings, or buzzes, it takes your attention. And another way that companies do this is through algorithms. So an algorithm in this context is something that sorts information in a way that gets your attention. And so as an example, think about any of the social media products you use. All of the feeds that you see as you scroll are sorted in a way to get your attention. So therefore, those feeds are algorithmic.
Yeah.
The more time that you spend viewing something sends a signal back to the algorithm that says that you are interested in things like that, in whatever topic or whatever's in the video or in the photo or in the text. Their systems understand and learn about the content of the things you view so that as you view them, they can figure out, well, what else might you like and what other things share the attributes of the things that you pay the most attention to. And so algorithms of this nature create addiction. The more interesting the content is, the more time you spend looking at it, the more ads you see, the more stuff you buy, that's the bottom of the funnel. So your habits are recorded in order to feed the algorithms and to increase addiction. And not only are these things addictive, but the information in all these social feeds that we stare at all day are not necessarily useful or true. They're just addictive. So just because it's popular doesn't mean it's correct, which for kids whose frontal lobes haven't developed is very important to consider because they have a difficult time discerning between, correct and popular. A lot of adults do too, but kids have a harder time. So let's see what an algorithm looks like in real life. Everybody take out your phones, please, if you have them. And open Instagram. Once you've got Instagram open, tap on the Instagram logo at the top left, and then tap on following. Notice the way that the feed is organized. It is, of course, the people you're following. That's the title of the thing. At the bottom of each post, it shows how long ago the post was made. And you'll notice that the feed is ordered by time, with the newest posts at the top. And as you go and you see the second post, third post, fourth, and fifth, they're ordered by time and get older as you go down. That is not an algorithmic feed. That is a time-sorted feed. Now, go back, hit the home button at the bottom left. That'll take you back to the main feed. This is the thing that you generally start off looking at. Now, slowly scroll through and notice at the bottom of each post how long ago the post was made, and compare that to the posts below it. Notice how many of the posts are from people that you don't follow, how many of them are ads, and how some of them are from 2 weeks ago, and then a week ago, and then today, and then last week, and then last month, and then today. That is an algorithmic feed. That is what we're talking about. That is how you can identify if you are being exposed to an algorithm.
Good.
So think about this. Every time you visit a website and every time you open an app that has information provided by others, consider whether or not you or your kids are being exposed to an algorithm. Because if you are, then now algorithm, its goal is to make you addicted. Mm-hmm. And Instagram is one of the only social media apps that actually has the ability to do that, which is why I used it as an example. So we've talked about the dangers of algorithms and addiction. Now let's talk about how things that seem fun and innocent can actually be very dangerous. So I'm going to pick on two companies. There's lots more examples. I'll just have these two up as ways to start the conversation. So kids think that Snapchat is private because the messages disappear. The whole allure of Snapchat since day one, and I remember when it came out, was like, whoa, and then all of a sudden, everybody's using it to share naked pictures of each other because that's the safe place to do it, because they disappear. So if you want to do a risky thing, it kind of lowers the risk because you can send it to somebody, but then they can't keep it. The messages do not disappear. Your data is valuable. It does not get deleted. Snapchat does not provide this service for free and then just delete all the data. It's enormously expensive to run Snapchat. So the reason I'm picking on Snapchat is because they have an interesting little quirk. They allow third-party developers to build apps that can use and see Snapchat data. And historically, apps have been built in this way so that if you send me a photo that you think I'm only going to see once, and I have one of these third-party apps running, I can keep that photo, and you don't know. Not only do I get to keep the photo, it also turns out that the developer of the third-party apps also keeps the photos. The biggest one that was doing this got hacked. Those photos were all stolen and then used against the kids that were in the photos. When kids share inappropriate images of other kids or of themselves, that can be a criminal offense. That falls within the category of CSAM, child sexual and abusive material. There are severe felony level punishments for people that do that, including the kids sending their own photos. Whoever sends it gets in trouble, and whoever receives it gets in trouble, even though the person receiving it may not have even asked for it. So this is a very risky thing legally for children. According to Bark, who does they do child safety software, they say that there are 10,000 cases of sextortion per month on Snapchat. And they say that it's one of the biggest causes of suicide. Snapchat has a safety website, and to their credit, and I'll talk about this for Roblox too, they do have things in place. They don't seem to be trying to make this happen. It's just an extremely difficult problem to resolve. So they have a safety website where they write articles and talk about this stuff. And on Snapchat's own website, I'll read a quote here. They say, in 2023, 65% of Gen Z teens and young adults, and Gen Z right now means kids age 13 to 28, on all platforms and devices, not just Snapchat, said they or their friends were targeted in online catfishing scams. Catfishing is using a fake identity to exploit somebody. Or they were hacked by criminals who stole explicit personal imagery or other private information. In both scenarios, the resulting photos and videos were then used to threaten or blackmail the young people, with abusers demanding money, gift cards, more sexual imagery, or other personal information in supposed exchange for not releasing the material to the young person's family and friends. And I found it just very interesting that Snapchat is, I appreciate the fact that they're publishing this kind of information and that they're talking about this, because this is a big part of the problem. So Roblox. This is a system, we're talking a lot about, it's kind of default to thinking about kids on the internet doing so through smartphones, but of course through computers and through gaming consoles. And Roblox is available on all of those things. It's a system where people create their own games and then others can play those games. So there's 40 million games on Roblox, and supposedly 68 million people use Roblox every day. So they have their own software development language called Lua. And that's part of the attraction. And a lot of parents actually think that their kids using Roblox is good because it's educational, because they're learning how to build software, which from that perspective is true, kind of like Minecraft. A group called Hindenburg Research did an investigation that they published in September. And they found that Roblox, their research revealed an X-rated pedophile hellscape. Because it's an environment when you're in there, there's an online chat function. If you expose a child to online chat, they will meet predators. This is not the fault of Roblox. This is not the fault of Snapchat. This is the nature of online anonymous chat. Within the 40 million games that kids can play are games where people can solicit sexual favors. They can trade nude images. They can shoot up a hospital. There's bathrooms where you can engage in sex acts, hate speech written on chalkboards, and a lot more similar stuff like that. Really negative, gross stuff. Roblox supposedly has 2,300 moderators to try to deal with this kind of stuff, and they are not keeping up. It's really easy to find these things. A lot of researchers that have looked at Roblox just do basic quick searches and just find all kinds of games where you can just get into lots of creepy stuff. There's a group called Protect Young Eyes. Website is protectyoungeyes.com. And they look at apps and they help parents understand, is this app safe? Is this app safe? What should I expose my kids to? And then they rate the apps based on a bunch of categories. So they rated Roblox as high for all of their negative categories: sex, nudity, privacy, violence, scariness, predators, and language. So these are two examples. I'm actually not trying to place blame on these companies. I'm trying to raise awareness as to how these things work and how dangerous online chat is. Because remember, the two dangers are algorithms, addictive algorithms via social media primarily, and online chat. So Snapchat and Roblox are not necessarily bad actors. They are both being sued fairly regularly, especially Roblox, for people claiming that they are bad actors, that they are acting negligently or negatively. But that's not my point here. My point is that public community moderation is difficult, especially at global scale. Because in the first slide, 6 billion people are on the internet. 5 billion of them are on social media. So those 6 billion people theoretically have access to Roblox. Like you can't, and every other platform. Like this is not something that you can wrap your arms around and then have people go in and just look and be like, oh, found one. They're just, it's an endless fountain of terrible stuff. So it's just the nature of chatting anonymously with strangers. I want to make a very specific point. that children should not be exposed to anonymous chat. So, because there's a lot of nuance, and a lot of the conversations I see online about these things are like, well, but there's controls and there's this and that and this. If there is anonymous chat, it's dangerous. That's all there is to it. There's no nuance required past that. Many online games have chat functions. All of those chat functions should be avoided. Some games allow a parent to go in and like set a password and like turn off chat. Okay, cool. Because then if the kid can't get into it, problem solved. But a lot of the games have it so that that's not possible. And so these games exist similar to Roblox on smartphones, computers, Xboxes, PlayStations, all the above. Every town in the United States has a sextortion problem. There's been cases here in Boise. There are houses here in Boise that facilitate this stuff in regular neighborhoods. Unsolicited contact from strangers, if you are online, is common and it should be expected. Kids are being manipulated, addicted, and harmed by people that take advantage of anonymity. So, okay, let's move on. Let's talk about AI. AI is becoming more prevalent every day. The rate of acceleration of the technology is faster than any other technology we've ever been exposed to. So let's talk a little bit about how it works. Just do like a brief overview.
Hi.
The main issue with AI, from my perspective, is trust. So these systems, they're primarily in the form of chatbots currently. So you chat with ChatGPT, you chat with Google Gemini, you chat with Microsoft Copilot, which is powered by ChatGPT. And you ask questions and you say things and it comes back and responds. It responds very confidently. It responds very strongly. It responds in ways that sound very true. Not necessarily the case. Those systems lie. The programmers that build the systems call the lies hallucinations. They hallucinate. They lie all the time. It drives me nuts because I try to use them myself and I'm like, stop lying to me, man. Like, And so the main issue with these systems right now is trust. So we talked about brain development with kids' ability to parse truth from not truth. As these systems become more and more prevalent, they're appearing everywhere. They're appearing in places where we don't even know they are. Where, I read an article the other day. I'm into photography. There's a photography website that I follow. I read an article. It says it was written by a person with a name. It was definitely not written by a person. It was like, obviously just they copy pasted from ChatGPT and called it a day. But they didn't say that. They didn't say, hey, I didn't actually write this. I had my computer write it. So therefore the contents are not trustworthy. So another important thing to know, these systems, where they get the information that they present to you, is from the existing internet. So their systems scour the public internet, grab all the data. It's called scraping. They scrape all the data from public websites. They ingest it and they try to learn how humans communicate and which words get associated with which words and which sentences get associated with which sentences and what the structure of paragraphs are and what the structures of thought are. But they're pulling it from the public internet, which has no correlation to truth or usefulness. In fact, a lot of times these AI systems will provide references with their responses, and the reference will be a Reddit post. A random person said a random thing, and it's now used as a reference as if it's true because it exists. And so AI systems, I think about it as being an abstract proxy of the existing internet. So instead of going and searching the internet yourself, it'll do it and then it'll tell you about it, and it may or may not represent, it may or may not even represent the truth of what it actually saw. It'll redo stuff and then feed it to you in a different way. And so another thing that's really important and a little bit disturbing is that as the data from the internet passes through these proxies, passes through these AI systems before it gets to you, the programmers that make the AI systems inject their biases into these proxies. And so as the proxy receives data, if they go, well, that data is insensitive, so we're going to change it.
Sure.
OpenAI has published public research papers where they say this. They say, we inject our biases because we don't want to hurt people's feelings. And I think that's very dangerous. One of the goals that their research papers say that OpenAI in particular has is that they're trying to increase fairness and representation. So they are injecting their biases around what they think is fair. So you got a group of dudes in California who have a perspective. Their perspective may not be the same as a person in France or Madagascar or Singapore or China or wherever else. So they are injecting themselves into this proxy and then representing it as if it's the truth. And I bring it up because you put that in front of a child. That child has no idea as to all the layers that are between them and the truth. And there are criminal implications for kids, similar to what we talked about on Snapchat, but now in a different way. So these systems can make pictures. So I'll quote a news article about a situation in Florida. In what appears to be the first criminal case of its kind, 2 teenage boys were charged under a 2022 Florida law for allegedly creating AI-generated images depicting middle school classmates. The arrest report says that the boys, aged 13 and 14, created the images of the students who were between the ages of 12 and 13. So these young teenage boys, I don't know if they've actually ended up going to jail or what happened to them, but they did get arrested for making fake images inspired by the real images of their classmates. People call it a deep fake. That's what a deep fake is. So AI systems should be looked at with maximum skepticism, and they should be considered to be fraudulent by default. That is how we should tell our kids about AI, and if we're going to expose them to these chatbots, that's how we should give them the context for what these things are. Maximum skepticism, fraudulent by default, which actually in and of itself could be a great source of education. This is how you can learn to be skeptical. This is how you can learn to assess information. It's so problematic that it's useful, or it could be when looked at through the right lens. These chatbots are being used to write books. There's a family in the UK. A wife bought her husband a book on foraging mushrooms. They went out with their kids, and they all got poisoned. The book was written by AI and sold on, the guy said, it was actually a Reddit post that I read where this guy talked about his experience where his wife bought him this book. And he was like, I won't name the name, but it was a major bookstore. I'm like, okay, it's probably Amazon or something. I don't know. But, this is a new sort of paradigm. And of course that's happening, but it's now happening. It's no longer just like, oh, I wonder if somebody's going to do that. I think from what he said, he didn't say that any of them died. I think they all survived, but they all got poisoned. Lucky them, because, man, to get the wrong mushroom, that'd be bad. And they're being used to create fake human interaction. And this is another just inevitable one, right? Because it's always the sexual stuff that leads the technology race a lot of times. And so, there's a website called Get Honey, where you go on there, you tell it what type of woman you like. And so you say, I want an anime woman, I want a realistic woman. And then you scroll through a catalog of different looks, and then all of them have bios of who they are and what they do and what they're into, and they've got a whole suite of pictures, and then you can pay to chat with them and to access their pictures and to watch videos of them. And people develop real relationships, especially young people, because they think their brain thinks they're interacting with a human. And they know they're not, but their brain thinks they are. And so imagine being in middle school right now. So you go on and well, we're learning about World War II. What did Nazis look like? Asian women, black guys? Probably not. I'm guessing those guys weren't on the team. What did George Washington look like? Very beautiful black man. I don't think so. I was told that that's not the case. I don't think that's true. And if I'm in middle school, how the heck am I supposed to know that that's not George Washington? Because this is Google Gemini, both of these. Now, Google's responded to this and we took it down and this and that, but they haven't changed their statements around their injecting biases into the systems. They just treated this as like, oh, whoops, it was a mistake. This is by design because they don't want to hurt people's feelings. Yeah. So keeping kids safe online is not just about restricting what kids can or can't do. It involves our actions as parents, and it involves the data that we give to third parties about our kids. I'm going to share a video right now. This is actually an ad from T-Mobile in Germany.
Hey, Mom. Hey, Dad. It's me, Ella. Well, a digital version of me. Just a bit older. Amazing what technology can do these days, isn't it? All you need are a couple of pictures, like the ones you share on social media, where they can be taken and used by everybody. I know, for you, these pictures are just memories. But for others, they are data. And for me, maybe the beginning of a horrible future. A future where my identity can be stolen just like that. Where I can go to prison for things that I would never do. Imagine my credit score being destroyed, Dad. Or my voice copied to scam you, Mom.
Mom, I'm in trouble.
I need you to send me money, please. I don't want to become a meme, humiliated by everyone at school.
Kill yourself, you fucking loser.
And I certainly don't want this. What you share online is like a digital footprint that will follow me around for the rest of my life. I'm telling you this because I know you love me and would never do anything to harm me. So please, Mom, please, Dad, protect my virtual privacy.
So that's pretty scary. I've watched that like 10 times. It still makes me emotional every time I watch it, even though I know it's an ad. But the message is important. And so let's talk about what we can do about it. I hear a lot of people talk about laws. So a lot of the conversations I hear around this topic are focused on what the government can do. And that the laws should protect our kids and protect our families. And my opinion is that these types of laws are mostly irrelevant, and they usually have major unintended consequences. We've had laws on this stuff since 1997 that are supposed to limit the age at which certain services can be accessed. Completely irrelevant. That chart still exists that shows up and to the right all the way until today. Governments like to pretend that their job is to keep us safe. And I disagree with that premise. Every government entity that I've been exposed to in the United States is only incentivized to protect itself. Governments do not keep my family safe. Corporations don't keep my family safe. My wife and I keep my family safe. Our extended family, our tribe, helps us stay safe as a group. But we do not outsource our security to people that we don't know, especially those that run governments. The world has a lot of risk, and it's up to us as parents to raise our kids so that they're competent at assessing the risk and dealing with it. So there are technical things you can do, but I think actually the non-technical things, like the stuff here, are more important, and it's why I have them first. So the primary thing that I think about in a non-technical solution to this big problem is behavior mirroring. So if my wife and I are sitting at the dinner table staring at our phones, and then our kid, who has had his iPad taken away so he doesn't have a device, is just sitting there like, this is interesting. I'm here by myself. Maybe this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to stare at my phone. So one day when I get one, that's what I'll do with my family. So it's up to us to set the example. Tech-free Tuesday, I think, is a cool idea. Kids get home from school on a Tuesday, or just pick your day. No devices for the rest of the day. No internet. Just family time. No outside world trying to program our brains while we're in our own homes. At our house, we do Sunday Shabbos. And what it is we take the entire day of Sunday. We do that. We do the same thing. No outside world. We're constantly getting bombarded by stuff from the outside, most of which makes us feel like crap. So every Sunday, we turn it all off. We go on bike rides, we play board games, we get bored, we do Legos, we do walk around and just wander. Last Sunday, we did a 3-hour bike ride. It was amazing. We started doing this in October of 2024. It was earlier this week, actually, this past week, we went to a parent-teacher conference with our kids' teachers. And what was interesting is that they do a monthly performance assessment of our son's scholastic performance and also how he's doing with social dynamics. And it stood out that from September to October, because October is when we started doing Sunday Shabbos, all of his performance in school increased and has increased every month since then. Maybe related, maybe not, but it's awfully coincidental. His teachers told us all this. They didn't know that we were doing anything different. They just were reporting the results. And the trend has continued. So he actually was, they were measuring a bunch of his scholastic performance against the bell curve. And were showing us that currently he's right of the bell curve. Before October, he was left of the bell curve. They told us that his social interactions since October have become more constructive and positive. Because my wife and I are disengaged from our phones on Sundays, it gives us these extended periods of interaction and communication. So all of our attention is together. None of our attention is being taken anywhere else. We are choosing how to use our most important currency, and we're putting it into our family. It's not being taken. It's not being stolen. And what's amazing, and the reason I bring this up is that the support that we've gotten from our family is fantastic. Everybody sees what we're doing. They respect it. They value it. They don't call us on Sundays. They don't come over on Sundays. They know what we're doing, and they support us in doing it, and it's had really great results. And the school thing is a cool anecdote, because we've actually seen it ourselves. Like we already knew that it's been having a very positive impact. Our interactions together as a family have shown it. But having these strangers that didn't know tell us that, hey, this timeline exactly matches when you guys made this change was really cool. And so we need to teach our kids what it's like to live without tech. They need to know. We are one of the last generations that got to do that as kids. Or me anyways. I was born in 1980. So I grew up without tech. Luckily, I was born when I was because I'm into computers, and it just matched up that in the 90s, I got to do what my brain likes to do and play with computers. At the time, without the internet. And so we need to teach our kids what it's like to be bored, to socialize, to specifically intentionally avoid screens, and to avoid manipulation. When you put your kids' images on somebody else's servers, like we saw in that T-Mobile ad, you take away their consent to opt in to being on the internet. And they may not desire their data being on the internet when they're an adult. They may very much regret that. And once it's there, the internet is forever. The data does not get deleted. So I think it's very important for us as parents to consider what we're opting our kids into permanently on their behalf, as we desire to do really, wonderful things, right? We want to share stuff with family and grandparents and cousins. That part of it is so cool and so lovely, but it comes with side effects. That was interesting that the University of Texas did an experiment with 800 students where they're trying to see how well people can complete tasks when their smartphones are nearby, even when they're not using them. And so the participants with their phones in another room significantly outperformed those with their phones on their desk. And they also slightly outperformed those participants who had kept their phones in their pocket. Findings from this study suggest that the mere presence of a smartphone can reduce cognitive capacity and impair cognitive function, even though people feel like they're giving their full attention and focus to the task. Okay, so let's talk about technical solutions. So there's a whole bunch of systems out there, smartphone restriction programs and apps that you can put on a kid's phone. There's even smartphones that are designed specifically for kids and sold by the companies that make these systems. So like a really popular one is Bark, Gab, Pinwheel, Guardian, Boomerang, Custodio. There's I did some research and I found 36 of them. So there's a whole bunch of people trying to help solve this problem. The thing is, from my perspective as a technologist, I look at ways to implement restrictions in the most fundamental ways first. And a lot of these third-party systems are adding a Band-Aid on top of a broken thing. And so these recommended smartphone alternatives are specific in that regard, in that if you use, for example, an iPhone or an Apple Watch or an iPad, they have built-in restriction systems in the system at the system level. So you don't add a Band-Aid on top. You use something built into the system. It's therefore more secure than the Band-Aid solution and a lot harder for the kid to overcome. And then I've got a couple of phones that are not really smartphones at all. The light phone is like a hybrid between a smartphone and a dumb phone, where it can do navigation and music, but it doesn't have other apps. There isn't an app store otherwise. And then you could do like an old school dumb phone, but then you lose the ability to track location. And some of the hardware is not very good. They've kind of gotten to the point where it's just kind of junk. And something I think really important to consider when it comes to, like, if you're going to have your kid carry a phone, often a big reason to do so is for security, like during an emergency, or for whatever it is, small emergency, big emergency, if they need to call home or they need to get directions or you need to call them or you need to get their location. When you need to do that stuff, you want it to work. And you want it to work every single time. And so investing in high quality gear, especially stuff made by Apple, because their quality of their hardware is light years beyond all the other manufacturers. They make stuff that lasts. You put a big rubbery case on it and throw it in the backpack, it's gonna work. And in fact, when you lock down an iPhone and you take off the internet and you take off apps and you take off the camera and you take off all this other stuff, the battery lasts forever. And so you put this super reliable emergency device with them when they go to school, and they can't use it to get distracted. It's only for specific, it's a tool, not a toy. It will work when it needs to. The reason that I put this note at the bottom, because this is a controversial thing to say, and like other technology people probably like, oh, you're just an Apple fanboy, and I'm certainly not. This is a technical assessment. Google is an advertising company. Android is an advertising product. Google bought Android a long time ago and currently runs Android and invests a lot of money. I don't know exactly how much, but it's far into the billions for sure, so that they can track you. So I find it to be an inherently flawed premise to give a child an advertising device. Even if it's locked down, even if it's restricted, the way that Android works, it requires Google's tracking services to function. So it's a flawed idea, I find, to give a kid a device made by an advertising company. The downside to Apple products is they're expensive, but you can buy used stuff. So Apple has a refurbished store where you can get refurbished Apple gear, and it's like literally as good as new. When it's not blemished, they give it the same warranty as the new stuff. And there's a website called Swappa, which is really good for buying used tech gear. And I've used it a lot myself. And you can go all the way back to an iPhone 6S. And iPhone 6S and newer currently will be a relevant thing to have for a kid with the right restriction capabilities that are built into the system. If you do an Apple Watch, you want to get an Apple Watch Series 6 or newer. So I think the current one is the Series 10, but you can go back to Series 6. And as you go back that far, the devices get fairly inexpensive. But with old devices often comes an old battery. So add to the budget a battery replacement. Because with a fresh battery, the device will function properly. And then for iPads, they're usually listed by what year they were made in. And so you want to get a 2019 iPad or newer in order to have the system's functions that are necessary for restricting the devices. Later this year, I'm going to publish research on all the third-party restriction systems, like those 36 systems. I'm going to test them myself and validate that they do what they promise. And I've already started interviewing the people that run these companies, so that if you do invest in their systems, you know who you're giving your money to and what these people are trying to do. Okay, so that's if you're going to get a new device, but what about your existing stuff? So this headline, especially this first two words, this is key. Avoid the algorithms. It's the algorithms and online chat. Those are the two dangers. Avoid the algorithms and help them avoid you. So disable notifications. So I've come up with like a 3-level sort of fun system that I just made up. Level 1 is disable notifications for all the apps that you don't use. Probably have 75 apps that are just filling up all your notifications with a bunch of garbage that you don't look at anyways. Might as well clear that out, clear a little bit of headspace. Level 2 is disabling notifications for all of your social media apps so that they are not taking your attention. So if you choose to use social media, you do it when you want, and you don't let the thing ding, 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 ding every time your feed updates. Level 3 is the highest level in this little game, is disabling the notifications on all your messaging apps, including text messages, so that your device does not take your attention. Or in this case, the attention of your kids, most importantly. On a kid's device, straight to level 3. No notifications. Their phone should only take their attention when you call them. Paid services. So Google search is free. That means it's dangerous in this context. That means it's algorithmic. That means it's taking your data and selling it and that you're the product. There's a service called Kaggy. I think it's $10 a month. It's a paid search engine. It's great. I use it myself. Gmail, free. Probably not so good reasons as to why it's free. Should pay for email. There's a company called Fastmail. That's who I use. And then we talked about a little bit about the phone and tablet controls. I'm just reiterating here that social media is a dangerous drug. So if you're going to avoid algorithms, they come from social media. Avoid social media, especially for kids. I mean, this list applies to adults and kids alike, but for kids, like, take the most hardline approach. So since these advertising companies try to follow you around the internet, there's ways to break the systems that they use to follow you. And ad blocker is the easiest way to do that. A lot of people have ad blockers, but for example, there's one called Privacy Badger by a group called the Electronic Frontier Foundation. It's free, but it seems that they're doing it as a community service, as far as I can tell. That's the one I use. And then there's a bunch of browsers that have built-in systems to block those tracking scripts. So Safari, Firefox, Brave, those are some popular ones. The DNS filter thing, this is for the more tech-savvy people. This is not something that's, if you have a tech person in your family, maybe they can help you implement NextDNS. This blocks things actually at a lower level, at a more fundamental level, a more complete way to block your system's ability, your computer or your phone's ability to even if it tries to attempt to communicate with Facebook, it will stop that communication. I've been running that on my stuff for a long time. You can make the screen black and white. Make it boring. Where's my phone? I have a switch. I have a switch on my phone. When I put it in Do Not Disturb mode, it's all black and white. It's weird when I look at photos. I can't tell if they're exciting or not. It's kind of the whole purpose. So I think with kids, I think about when you expose a kid to tech, you set expectations. If you give them an iPhone out of the box, it's this beautiful, addicting, fantastic, powerful machine that does everything, and it's amazing. If you take it out of the box yourself and lock it down first and give it a black and white screen and take away all the functions and take away the internet and take away the camera and take away all this other stuff, they don't know that it can do all these other things. I mean, their friends will probably show them eventually, but you can establish that expectation in a different way. So I think a black and white screen is a good way to do that. Always on displays. All the new phones have always on displays. If you leave it up on the desk, it's always showing the time and just so happens to show the notifications. Constantly taking your attention. People work with their phones. They're always on displays. They're working on their laptops and there's their phone right there, constantly taking their attention. So turn that off. Probably more for adults. There's a thing called a brick. It's this little gizmo device that you can tap your phone on it. Right now, it's just for iPhones. They're working on an Android version, but you tap your iPhone on it, and so you can switch your iPhone by physically tapping from locked to unlocked, or like restricted mode to unrestricted. So let's say you want to do Tech-Free Tuesdays. Everybody gets home from work and from school. You have one of these by the front door. You walk in the house, bam, your phone just turned into something useless and boring. Put it in the drawer, go hang out with your family. Go to work the next day, tap it on the way out, goes back to normal. These are, I think, $50. Out there smiling at you. So yeah, to avoid the addiction cycle, just make the phone boring. Okay, so when you consider using a system that's internet connected, ask yourself some questions. Is it free? Does it use algorithms to manipulate me? Who owns it? An advertising company or a product company? Google's an advertising company. Apple is a product company. Okay, this is the last slide. This stuff takes action. Behavior change requires practice. These are things you can do right now. As we finish this conversation, we're going to get up and leave. By default, in any other environment, all of us will immediately check our phones. What if we didn't? What if we got up from here and didn't? What if we got up from here and we got in our cars and drove home and didn't look at our phones the entire way home? Didn't have it up on the dash, didn't have it sitting on the thing, had it in the back seat in a bag. What if you got home and you've got your phone in your bag or whatever, and you put your bag down and you just walk in the house? You don't check your phone. What are you going to miss out on? Like a new dance or something on TikTok? You know? No. The interesting thing is that this is not easy. We all know this. We all know that, like, that sounds cool, man, but I'm still going to check my phone. Cool advice, but yeah. That's addiction. You will feel withdrawal symptoms. You will feel weird at first, and then you'll feel good. And then when you go check your phone, you'll feel the difference. You go check it later today or tomorrow or however long you can stand, you will feel a difference. So pay a lot of attention to that. Be very conscious of what you're experiencing. And this is why it's important to do tech-free Tuesdays or Sunday Shabbos or whatever it is that you choose to do. The results will be obvious, and they will feel good. And they will set the example for your kids, which is, I think, the biggest thing that can be done. So you're here today in this room to help your kid not become a statistic. So help them avoid algorithms and avoid online chat. Avoid algorithms and avoid online chat. Those are the two things that correlate to that suicide chart. It's worth all of your attention and effort is those two things. And there's no time like right now to do it. And so you can do this. You can disable your notifications. You can take your attention back. So this is why I've created the Family IT Guy brand, and FamilyITGuy.com is to help people do this stuff. So the things that are difficult to do from a technology perspective, like locking down an iPhone, well, how exactly do I do that? So I've created that. I'm in the process of creating step-by-step tutorials for all of the major tech platforms. How do you lock down an Android phone? How do you lock down an iPhone? How do you lock down an iPad? How do you lock down an Amazon Fire tablet? How do you lock down a Chromebook? How do you lock down a Windows computer? So it just takes all the thinking out of it. You just follow the guide. And so right now I've got the iPhone guide published, and because the Apple operating system wasn't designed for kids, but it can be adapted. And if you want, I've got a little, speaking of online chat rooms, I have one for adults, not anonymous for the most part, but it's my area for parents. So if you go to community.familyitguy.com, it'll invite you to the Slack group that I've created, or if you scan the QR code, it'll do the same. Thank you very much.